Hey there friends, so today we are going to be doing the first heading, which is 19.1 modes of reproduction for the chapter 19 sexual reproduction in plants. So let us start the topic. So what do you mean by modes? Modes means ways. Modes means ways. Okay, so now we are going to be learning different ways of reproduction in plants. Okay, plants reproduce in three ways, which is first is vegetative, second one is asexual, third one is sexual. So how do plants reproduce? They reproduce in three different ways. Okay, now let us first focus on the first way being vegetative. Let us focus on how plants reproduce in vegetative way. We're going to look at this paragraph afterwards, okay, after we are done with the topic of asexual and vegetative, but for now just focus on vegetative. Now, vegetative reproduction, there are total 1, 2, 3 ways. How many ways? There are total 3 ways how the plant produce in vegetative reproduction. The first way is fragmentation. The second way is fission, and the third way is finally budding. Now, before we discuss the 3 ways vegetative reproduction is done by plants, let us understand what vegetative reproduction is. What do you mean by vegetative reproduction? So now, if you look over here in the paragraph, we have a clear definition. So, vegetative reproduction, it involves the formation of new plants from vegetative somatic cell bud organ of the plant. So what does this mean? This basically means that in vegetative reproduction, a new plantlet, what is a plantlet? A plantlet is a baby plant. Okay, a new plantlet is formed from the vegetative or somatic. What do you mean by vegetative or somatic? Vegetative or somatic is a part of the plant that you can cut off and it will not kill the parent plant. So vegetative or somatic is basically the part of the plant that can be cut off. Okay, the vegetative's other name is somatic. Okay, so what happens here is that in vegetative reproduction, the formation of a new plant occurs from the vegetative somatic cell bud or organ of the plant. So how is this done? So for example, suppose I have a plant here. Okay, suppose I have a plant here. Now please excuse my drawing. Now we have a plant here, right? Okay, now if I take this plant and I cut off, or suppose I just cut off this stem of the plant. Okay, after I cut off this stem of the plant, it will fall off. It will leave the parent's plant, right? Obviously, if I cut this off, if I cut off the stem, then it will leave the parent plant. So this is the parent plant right here. This is the parent plant. Now this is the stem that fell off the plant that I cut off. Now I embedded this in the soil. Okay, now this plant here, this plant or this stem of the plant, it will undergo only mitotic division. What is mitotic division? Division of the cell other than the sex cells, right? So this will undergo mitotic division, and over time this will grow, and it will grow, and it will grow, and it will turn into a new plant. This is the parent plant. Parent plant still exists, and then we have the baby plant. So basically vegetative reproduction is the formation of new plants from a part of the parent plant. What are the parts? It can be cell, bud, or organs of the plant. Now we have understood what vegetative reproduction is. Now we can go on and we can start with the types of vegetative reproduction. Now, as I told earlier, there are total 1, 2, and 3 types of vegetative reproduction. The first one is fragmentation. Second one was, what was second one? The second one was fission, and the third one was budding. Now, what is fragmentation? Let us focus on fragmentation. So, fragmentation. In fragmentation, for suppose, it occurs only in filamentous algae. It occurs in many different algae, but for example, we have filamentous algae. What do you mean by filamentous algae? Filamentous algae is basically algae that are in a filament form, in a straight line, vertical form. What is a filamentous algae example? We have Spirogyra. Spirogyra is one type of filamentous algae. Okay, it's something like this. We have a Spirogyra. What happens to this Spirogyra is there occurs an accidental breaking. Suppose I have here a, let me draw this again. Okay. Suppose I have here a filamentous Spirogyra. Okay, with filamentous algae, which is, for example, is Spirogyra. So I have here a Spirogyra, right? This is a Spirogyra. It's something like this, right? Now, an accidental breaking will occur. Okay, suppose I have a Spirogyra and accidentally I broke the Spirogyra like that. Okay, now what happened to the Spirogyra? There are two parts of the Spirogyra, right? The top part and the bottom part. So this part will break down and this part will break down. So this will turn into two different parts, right? So I'm going to take this. This is the first part. This is the second part of the Spirogyra, right? So in filamentous algae, an accidental breaking, here's the definition. In a filamentous algae, an accidental breaking of the filament being this thing. This is the filament, right? This is the filament. Okay, filament into many fragments, each fragment having at least one single cell may give rise to a new filament of the algae by self-division. Example, Spirogyra. So what happens here is that an accidental breaking occurs. It can break into many pieces, but for now, because I cannot draw so many pieces, I'll just suppose it breaks into two parts. Okay, it is mandatory for each part to have at least one cell. At least one cell. It is mandatory for each part to have at least one cell. So what will happen here? These are the parts. Okay, there might be many parts, there might be hundreds of parts, but here these are the two parts of the Spirogyra. Each of this Spirogyra, what will happen? They need to have at least one cell, and after a while they undergo cell division. Okay, the cells they have cells, right? They're made up of a bunch of cells. These cells, they undergo cell division and they grow into an adult, and basically they multiply into more Spirogyra, and that is how fragmentation occurs. Okay, so when we are learning about fragmentation, there are a couple of points that you need to keep in mind. The first point being, it occurs in filamentous algae. An accidental breaking of the filament into many fragments occur, and each fragments need to have at least one cell. And what happens? This is done by cell division. An example is Spirogyra. Okay, now we understood what fragmentation is. We can move on into fission. Now, fission, what happens? Fission, it occurs in, this is a definition of fission. Okay, it occurs in unicellular organisms like bacteria and yeast, where the content of the parent cell divides into 2, 4 or 8 daughter cell, and is accordingly, the fission is known as binary or multiple fission. Each newly formed daughter cell grows into a new organism. So now suppose I have here a bacteria. Okay, suppose here I have some sort of a bacteria. Okay, now what happens to this bacteria? Here an accidental here a breaking of the content of the parent cell occurs. So the content of the parent cell, it divides. It can divide into two. If it divides into two, it's called binary. So if it divides into two, then it's called binary fission. If it divides into 4 or 8, then it is called multiple fission. Okay, so if it divides into 2, it's called binary fission, and if it divides into more than 2, that is 4 or 8, then it will be called multiple fission. So what happens here is that the bacteria, it breaks. Okay, it breaks into 2 4 or 8 daughter cells. Okay, so it turns into 2, 4 or 8 daughter cells. Here I will take 2 daughter cells. Okay, here I'll take 2 daughter cells. Okay, now here if the bacteria divides into 2, 4 or 8 daughter cells, and each of these daughter cells, each of this newly formed daughter cell, they grow into a new organism. These grow into a new organism. Okay, very simple, no need to go deep into this topic. You just need to understand it occurs in bacteria and yeast, and it occurs in the content of the parent cell. And then you have to understand what binary is and multiple. Binary means 2, multiple means more than 2, right? So 2, 4 or 8 daughter cells, that's all you need to understand. And these daughter cells, they grow into a new organism. That is it, not so hard, right? Now let us go to vegetative reproduction's last and final part, which is budding. Now budding, it also occurs in unicellular plants. A bud-like outgrowth is formed on one side of the parent cell, and it soon separates and grows into a new individual. Example in yeast. So what is budding? Budding is basically a process in which a bud-like structure. So for example, I have here a bacteria or yeast or anything. Okay, and now in this bacteria, what happens is that in one side of the parent cell, a small bud-like outgrowth is grown. Okay, one side of the parent cell, a small bud-like outgrowth is grown. Okay, after a while, what happens is that this separates from the parent cell. So now we have this bud-like outgrowth here, right? It will soon separate from the parent cell. So we can just separate this and it will come off of the parent cell. So what is this? This is the parent cell. This is the bud-like outgrowth. Now this bud-like outgrowth, what happens to it? It grows and it grows and it turns into a new individual. So easy, nothing much. It's very easy. It's a very simple topic. So that is vegetative reproduction. Now a quick recap of vegetative reproduction. Vegetative reproduction occurs in plants, right? So what happens in vegetative reproduction? It occurs from a somatic cell, vegetative or somatic cell, right? And what happens here? There is only mitotic division takes place. Okay, in vegetative reproduction, only mitotic division takes place. What do you mean by mitotic division? Only the cells will divide, not the sex cells. Only the non-sex cells will divide, right? And no gamete fusion is involved. Obviously, have we seen any gamete fusion here? What is gamete? Sex cells. Any fusion was occurred? No, right? Only a single parent was there. And newly formed plants are genetical clones of the parent plant. Obviously, they are exactly the same. I shown many diagrams here. Did they look any different? No, they were exactly the same. So characteristics of vegetative reproduction. What are the characteristics of vegetative reproduction? It is that only mitotic division takes place, no gamete fusion is involved, and newly formed parent plants are genetical clones of the newly formed plants are the genetical clones of the parent plant. That is what we understood, right? And then we learned fragmentation. It occurs in filamentous algae. An accidental breaking of the filament into many fragments takes place, each fragment having at least one cell, and it gives rise to a new filament. We learned that by cell division. Remember, it happens by cell division. Fragmentation occurs by cell division. Example, we have Spirogyra. Then fission, we have the accidental breaking in unicellular organisms like bacteria, the breaking of the cell into 2, 4 or 8 daughter cells, and it is known as binary or multiple fission. And finally, we learned that it occurs in unicellular plants. A bud-like outgrowth is formed one side of the parent plant and it separates and grows into a new individual. Example in yeast. And budding's example is in yeast, and a bud-like outgrowth is grown. Obviously, this is a very easy topic. No need to go so much in detail for this. Let us move on to the next part. Now, what did we learn in the beginning? We learned that there are 3 modes of reproduction, right? So various modes of reproduction. So first one we have just discussed is vegetative mode. Now we can go ahead and we can discuss asexual mode of reproduction. So now let's go and discuss asexual mode of reproduction. Now, asexual mode of reproduction, it occurs in plants, right? In plants, it occurs by asexual spores. Okay, in plants, asexual reproduction occurs by asexual spores. Okay, these asexual flowers may be flagellate or non-flagellate. What do you mean by flagellate or non-flagellate? Basically means it can move. Flagellate is these flagella type structures, these outgrowths in certain plants and organisms. There's some outgrowths which help help the organism to move, right? Here, asexual reproduction, it can occur with asexual spores which are flagellate or non-flagellate. Means they can move or they cannot move. They have flagella which helps them to move, or they don't have flagella. Okay, now in asexual reproduction there are two ways asexual reproduction takes part in asexual in plants, right? The first one is it occurs in lower plants, and the second one is it occurs in higher plants. So two type of asexual reproduction takes place. The first one is in lower plant, the second one is in higher plant. Let us discuss how it occurs in lower plant first. So in lower plants, including bryophytes and pteridophytes, special reproductive units are developed asexually on the parent body. These are called spores. They are microscopic and they are covered by a protective wall. When they reach the suitable environment, they develop into a new plant body. Example in bread molds, moss, fern, etc. Now, example, we have lower plants, bryophyte and pteridophytes. Okay, this is a group of lower plants. So what will happen in this example? I will take some plant here, for example. Okay, I'll just draw a random plant. Okay, let's take a mushroom here, for example, just for understanding. Okay, so what happened here is that special reproductive units develop asexually on the parent plant. So there's these small special units that just develop on the parent plant. Okay, they're very small. These special units, what are they? They are microscopic. And they are covered by a protective wall. Okay, there are two characteristics of this small special reproductive unit. They are microscopic, okay, and they are covered by a protective wall. And these units, they have a name and they are called spores. Okay, so what are the two characteristics of spores? The first thing of spore is they are microscopic, and the second thing of the spores is they are covered by a protective wall, right? They are covered by a protective wall. Now what happens is that these spores, they are formed on the parent body. Okay, they occur on the parent body. When they reach a suitable environment, they develop into a new plant body. So when the environment is suitable, when they like the environment, when the environment is suitable, they turn into a new body. They turn into a new plant body. And we have examples here. We have three examples here. The first one is, what is the first one? The first one is bread molds, second one is moss, and third one is fern. So what is spore formation in lower plants? In lower plants, including bryophytes and pteridophytes, special reproductive units are developed asexually on the parent body. These are called spores. They are microscopic and covered by a protective wall. When they reach the suitable environment, they develop into a new parent body. Very easy, very simple, no need to go so much into detail. There's a very easy topic. Now next thing we can focus on is in higher plants. I told there are two ways a spore formation occurs, asexual reproduction takes place. There are two ways that it takes place. The first one was in higher plants, the second one is in lower plants. Now in higher plants like pea, maize and gymnosperms, asexual reproduction is always heterosporous. Heterosporous means there are more than two spores involved. More than one spore involved. Okay, here spores are produced after meiosis. When are spores produced here? The spores are produced after meiosis. Okay, after meiosis. The small spores are called microspores. Okay, and the small spores, they give rise to the male gametophyte, and the female spores are called megaspores, and they give rise to female gametophyte. Very simple, very easy, no need to go into so much detail. There are heterosporous, and one gives rise to microspore, the other gives rise to megaspore. Okay, now we can continue with the next topic, which is sexual reproduction. Okay, before we go to sexual reproduction, let me give the characteristic or the similarities between a vegetative and asexual reproduction. Vegetative and asexual reproduction, they have some characteristics in common. Okay, the first one is that offsprings are produced from a vegetative unit by formed by the parent without fusion of gamete or sex cells. Obviously, offsprings, how did we learn in asexual reproduction? What happens? Spores are formed in one parent, right? Spores are formed. And in vegetative, what happened? What did we learn in vegetative? We learned that one part, which is the somatic part, cell or bud, anything of a part of the parent plant, falls off and it grows into a new plant, right? And it occurs without fusion of any gametes. What is gametes or sex cells? It doesn't. There is no formation of zygote. There is no formation of what you call sex cells or fusion of them or anything like that, right? So first point, what is the first point? First point being that they are vegetative unit. They are formed from a vegetative unit without the fusion of gametes. The second part is a single parent is involved. Obviously, if there is no fusion of sex cells or gametes, then obviously there is a single parent involved. Then offsprings are genetically identical to the parent. Obviously, offsprings are exactly the same because there is no mix-up of DNA. There is no change in, there is no fusion, there is nothing. The parents and the offsprings are genetically identical. They're exactly the same. There's no different genetics involved, right? Okay, now we can move on to the next topic. So the first thing, what did we learn? We learned that the various modes of reproduction, there are three types. Vegetative, we discussed. Asexual, we discussed. Now we are going to be discussing the last and final topic, which is sexual. Now let us go down and discuss about sexual reproduction. Okay, in sexual reproduction, it involves the fusion of male and female gamete, male and female reproductive cells, gametes, which are haploid and are produced by male and female reproductive organ. Okay, so what happened in sexual reproduction? In sexual reproduction, it involves the fusion. Fusion means the attachment or the joining of a male gamete and a female gamete. So we have a male sex cell and there is fusion of male and female gamete, and this process, which is the fusion of male and female gamete, is known as fertilization. The process of fusion of male and female gamete is known as fertilization. And this what happens is that, for example, here I have the egg, okay, the female sex cell, and I have here the male sex cell, right? It's a sperm, right? Or we can say different type of sex cells are there, but here, for example, I take a sperm and I take a egg, right? Now when this egg meets the when the sperm meets the egg, there is a fusion occurring. Okay, a fusion takes place, and this process of them meeting and fusing is called fertilization. When fertilization occurs, after the fusion finishes, then we have a newly formed type of cell called zygote. Okay, we have a new cell formed called zygote, which is diploid. What do you mean by diploid? Diploid means it has 46 chromosomes, right? For diploid means it has 46 chromosomes. Okay, haploid means it has 23 chromosomes. Okay, so a sexual reproduction involves a fusion of male and female gametes, a reproductive cell or gametes, which are haploid and are produced by male and female reproductive organs. This fusion is known as fertilization, and it results in the production of zygote. Now what happens after the zygote is formed? Here we have the zygote, right? After the zygote is formed, it undergoes many developments and lot of changes and all, and it gives rise to a new individual, which is diploid. Diploid means it has 46 chromosomes, obviously, right? It has 46 chromosomes. Because zygote is diploid, this is also diploid. Okay, now we can continue with the characteristics of sexual reproduction. Here, sexual reproduction has a couple of characteristics. The first one being that meiosis takes place somewhere in its life cycle. Meiosis takes place somewhere in its life cycle. Okay, meiosis is the division of the sex cell, right? And the second one being that the offsprings are not genetically clone of the parents. They are not exactly like the parents. They are not genetically like the parents. Obviously, we learned that in vegetative and asexual reproduction, the offsprings are genetically like the parents. Why? Because only a single parent is involved. Here, however, there are two parents involved, so obviously they are not genetically identical. They exhibit mixed characters of their parents. So finally, we understand that they exhibit mixed character of their parents. So the offsprings, they might have their father's features, they might have their mother's features. So offsprings are generally exhibiting mixed characteristic of their parents. So that is it for our topic of modes of reproduction. We learned that there are 3 modes of reproduction. We learned there is vegetative, asexual and sexual reproduction, and we learned a lot about them. So this is it for our today's topic. Thank you so much.